The 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee is the most disappointing thing since my probation officer, Chris Christopherson. You know, ever since I ran over that undocumented Korean family with my car, I've had to deal with that man coming to my house every weekend. That man is an insult to the human race and is an invasion of my privacy. He should be castrated to make an example of fools like him. The bigger question is why anyone gave this musical a chance in the first place. The title alone reeks of boredom and stagnation to the utmost degree possible. Unfortunately, this title was enough to draw millions of unsuspecting children and young adults the world over to go see it. They did not realize that the awfulness of what they were about to see was almost self-evident. I think everyone who went to see this musical knew deep down inside that there was at least a slight chance that it would be the biggest waste of time ever. For me, watching this musical was nearly as painful as the time I got this thing called a colonoscopy. So that's why I'm here today. I've set out to give this production a deep and thorough review and analysis. As usual, I'll probe really far and deep into everything in the musical, to pick out anything that's good and show you just how much stuff in this musical is awful. But mostly the second one. I've also taken the time to make a large batch of pizza rolls and some vodka gimlets. With that, I think we're ready to get started with the review. Let's spell our first word of the bee, shall we? Number 1. Nothing makes any sense. This entire musical makes no sense whatsoever. The premise is nonsensical and everything is just sloppily written and meshes together poorly. It's like the producers of this musical went to a daycare somewhere, collected up a bunch of toys that have been teethed on, and patched them all together to form a sloppily made mess. It's really lousy and useless and doesn't actually have a purpose. If you stand and look back at the musical as a whole, you'll see for yourself that this musical is very sporadic and that the events that actually transpire within lack purpose and reasoning. When I first heard about this musical, I was somewhat excited because well-known musical writer William Finn was the lyricist and writer. Having seen some of the shows he previously worked on, I assumed that this would be of the same high quality. But from prior experience, I know that just because someone well known as the producer doesn't actually mean that the content that results from the fruits of their labor will actually be good. It's like they didn't think that this musical needed to make any sense or anything. They just threw in whatever seemed to be funny at the time it was being made and tried to tie it all together later. Now, if any of you have doubts about what I'm saying, just keep watching this review and you will become all too aware of the horrors contained within this oversized pile of trash. Speaking of trash, let's talk about how this musical was structured. Number 2. The audience is expected to know everything. I'd like to point out that this musical has major issues with its plot. The first one is that the musical doesn't have a main character. Instead, we have 6 main characters. Olive Ostrovsky, William Barfi, Logan Schwarzenegger, Marcy Park, Chip Tolentino, and Leaf Coney Island Bear. There are also random audience contestants in the crowd who end up getting pointlessly shoehorned into the musical, but I'll get deeper into that later. The other big problem with the whole character situation is that it's not really clear which character we're supposed to be able to relate to. I mean, they're all about the same in terms of how weird they are and how they act. I suppose that young girls might be able to relate to Olive because she's an average girl who isn't completely ruined by the effects of Tumblr use, but at the same time she's almost a little too quiet when she talks. As a result, she sounds out of character in every musical number she's featured in because she sounds far too confident. Chip is a little relatable if you're a spelling bee alum or just a plain nerd, and I honestly have no idea what kind of person would be able to relate to this kid. Maybe someone who's completely lost all their sanity and been admitted to a mental hospital. You getting the point yet? It's difficult to look into the hearts of these characters. I'll get more in depth about this later. For all we know, they're just a bunch of antisocial kids who are in the spelling bee because their parents wanted them to be in it for no real reason at all. photo op, anyone? The audience is also expected to know certain things about the plot without having them explained first. And anyone who's watched anything ever knows that's not a good thing at all. Now before we talk about this, I'd like to point out that they do explain to the spelling bee noobs the official rules in the beginning. So don't come to me and start complaining about how I missed this and claim that not everything was left unexplained. In that case, you would be right in saying that's the truth. But let's move on to the good stuff, shall we? Primarily, this musical expects us to know things about the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee and the Putnam Optometrists. We're told very little about either of these throughout the course of the plot, so it's not really easy to tell what they are either, except from what we can assume because of what we're told about them. The Putnam County Spelling Bee is a spelling bee that takes place in an underground gymnasium in Putnam County. And whoever wins the spelling bee wins a $250 savings bond towards their future education and gets to move on to the National Spelling Bee. But they never actually tell us where this gymnasium is located. Now most people would assume that this means it takes place in a school gym, but you know what they say about making assumptions. It makes an out of ass and ing. Was that how it went? For all we know, the spelling bee might be held in an abandoned mine shaft somewhere, but we're not told anything about it except that it exists, and so any further details about it will remain hidden from us. Tackling the problem of the Putnam optometrists is a bit harder, since they're only mentioned one time and are not talked about again for the rest of the musical. What I can assume is that they're a group of optometrists that work in Putnam County, and for some reason they're offering a cash prize to whoever wins this county's spelling bee, probably because they've got money to burn. Rather than putting all this cash they've got to potentially good use, like financing the search for a cure for Crohn's disease, they decide to instead waste it to finance a flea-sized portion of someone's future education. Speaking of Crohn's disease, I can't tell you how many times I've had to make mad dashes to the bathroom this past year. They better come up with a cure for this quickly, or I don't know how many more pairs of Depends I'm gonna completely destroy in 2017 alone. But I digress. Back to the review. Another unfortunate reality about this whole thing is that even though the winner of the spelling bee would get the money, they might not even go to college to begin with, therefore throwing this entire prospect out the window. Perhaps if this musical had this thing in it called a Protagonist, we would have learned more about these and other things that were not elaborated on much, if at all. You see, when someone unfamiliar with something becomes involved, they usually ask other characters for some background info. And since we are following the events of the plot as if we are flies on the wall, when they explain things to the main character, they are explained to us as well. I don't see any good reason why they couldn't have done that with this musical. As far as I'm concerned, the writers put no real effort towards what they were trying to create. We haven't even gotten into the story yet, and I'm already confused. They should have researched how to write an interesting and engaging story before randomly typing shit into a computer and publishing it on fictionpress.com. I stress that if the nuances of the plot are confusing or not explained thoroughly, the audience won't care about that or the rest of the plot. I know from experience what this feels like. Speaking of interesting, let's talk about something that's not. The plot of this musical. Number 3. Plot is completely weird and makes no sense. One of the biggest problems with the musical, aside from the characters, is the poorly thought out story. The story is so laughably bad that I don't think I'll be able to describe its awfulness to the greatest degree of accuracy. But to be honest, I doubt anyone cares about my personal convictions. This is a review, so I'll try to do my best to do what I do. The first thing that happens is we start off with a really boring and sterile opening scene. It's a flashback to when this chick named Mona Lisa Peretti won the 3rd annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, which took place a long time ago. Back in like the 1920s or some shit. Back in those days, you probably could have been good at spelling. No one could just look up any word on Google and find its definition and use in a sentence. This opening scene is totally useless and was probably pointlessly shoehorned into the final product to lengthen it after William Dolphin ran out of ideas. The See, there was this Russian dude named Anton Chekhov who once said that if you put a gun over a lit fireplace, it's not just gonna sit there. At some point, this gun has gotta go off. In other words, if you're writing a musical and are starting to run out of ideas for making it longer and more interesting, do not tack irrelevant shit on what creative goal you have. It just brings down the whole ship. Just like the Titanic. We then flash back to the present and find out that we're actually watching the 25th annual spelling bee. Then the contestants start walking on stage and start singing this song out loud for no real reason. After enduring said cringe-inducing dirge for another 5 minutes, everyone gets in their seats and Mona Lisa gets back up again and starts talking some more. She tells us that because it's the 25th annual spelling bee, the Putnam optometrists I previously mentioned have decided to sacrifice a microbial portion of their paychecks to the winner of the spelling bee. They describe the prize as a $250 savings bond towards the future education of the winner. It was at this point in the musical when I began to understand in more detail the writing style, or shall I say the lack thereof. For one, we don't get to experience what these characters have done in the past, we have to be told about them. Right off the bat, this makes us totally uninterested in what the characters are doing and their situation. Especially Mona Lisa, because she basically functions as the narrator of this story, which is supposed to be visual and not described. Feels like this musical was written as a book or something. No wonder everything feels so lifeless and boring. It's filled with expository descriptions of things that we should be able to experience for ourselves. College is probably right around the corner for these kids. They look old enough to be in high school, or even older, and the winner of the spelling bee gets college money. But that seems a little small to make any impact whatsoever on the expenses that result from college. Now, I may be a 110-year-old psychotic murderer with a 5th grade education, and that I have never so much read a book in my entire life, but I know some things about college. My ex-wife used to teach at this one place. What was it called again? The University of Southern Ankeny? Before I sabotage your Cadillac's gas. Anyways, here's what you need to know about college. The people that run colleges are stupid and mean and make you buy loads of crap you don't actually need. On average, textbooks cost between $200 and $3.2 million. So even if you were buying an inexpensive book, you'd already be stretching your budget tighter than your anus could withstand. It's nonsensical that someone who is at least 6 times older than all the contestants wouldn't know something like this. And at the end of the day, when all the other college costs like tuition, room and board, cars, taxes, booze, and all those other things are taken into account, college is really expensive. And if you were a student at a well-known party school like West Virginia, or Iowa, or Mississippi, or Syracuse, or Minnesota, or one of those places, you probably wouldn't be able to host a small party inside your frat for $250. The inflation is real, kiddies. I would know. So next, Mona Lisa gets out a list and starts listing off people she needs to see, including some random people from the audience, before noting she needs to speak with this chick named Olive Ostrovsky. After a few seconds, she stirs from her seat and walks over towards her. This can't be good, can it? So the reason Mona Lisa called her over is because Olive hasn't paid her entrance fee of $25 yet. Now here's a better question. Why in the hell do you need to pay an insurance fee to get in the spelling bee? Why do they need to collect an insurance fee? Is it some kind of convoluted scheme to make money off of it or something? And I thought scalping was bad. Oh, sorry. I meant this kind of scalping. So Mona asks her if she has a parent in the audience that could pay the insurance fee for her. Then Olive tells her the shock of the century.
Is your mother here maybe, or your dad?
My dad's stuck at work, but he's gonna try to come later.
Now there's only one thing that Mona Lisa can be thinking, and that is this. What parents would leave their child at a spelling bee by themselves? Wouldn't they want to watch their child compete? Do they even care? If my disappointing son had participated in a spelling bee, I certainly would have attended. So why couldn't her parents have known the spelling bee was today? Did they forget to set the alarm in the morning? Are they stupid? Are they dead? What on earth is happening? But in order to save time, she decides to let it slide under the table for the moment and lets all return the receipt. Then Mona Lisa introduces the word announcer, Douglas Haunch, who is returning to the job after a 5-year hiatus. Once again, we are never informed why Haunch was on hiatus in the first place. See a trend? Then he introduces to us the comfort counselor, Miss Mahoney, who is just a gender-bent version of Mitch Mahoney, the intended character. Mahoney is a sex-convict who is helping out at the B as part of her community service. As a goodwill gesture, if it can be said in that sense, she moves downstage and leads all the kids in the Pledge of Allegiance. And then, this happens. Haunch didn't even get a chance to finish the pledge before those kids ruined its holiness forever. He then explains the rules of the bee, which takes another 3 minutes of our time because it's another musical number. As we obligate ourselves to sit through even more pointless and sterile singing, we begin to ask ourselves our motivation for continuing to pay attention to what we're seeing. Luckily, the plot is about to get another move on soon, but not in the kind of way you'd imagine. Number 4. Welcome to Douglas Poncheros. May I take your order? So now after that annoying introductory sequence that no one cares about and the introduction of the equally boring child abandonment subplot, the not so long awaited Putnam County spelling bee finally begins to get underway. It starts out when this democratic socialist named Logan Schwarzenegger takes the stand and Haunch gives her her first word. To say the very least, I have no idea what that word even means. Then we witness Logan spell the word out for us.
F-T-R-A-B-I-S-M-U-S.
That is correct.
And she gets it right. No surprises there. Then Leaf Coney Island Bear stands up and makes his way to the microphone. Now I have no idea what kind of a person wears a red cape, a blue shirt, and awkward looking shorts with space unicorns on them at the same time. So based on his actions, it is obvious that Leaf is an interesting character. Also, I'd like to mention that the only reason he's in the spelling bee in the first place is because the runner-up and the champion of the spelling bee in his district had to attend a bat mitzvah, which was conveniently planned to take place right in the middle of the spelling bee. Based on how he's acted, it's pretty obvious that the Basin district was pretty desperate in choosing him to represent them in the bee. Haunch then proceeds to spend nearly a minute and a half saying all of the information about the word. At first, Leaf seems very unconfident and unsure how to spell it, but then he sees his family and goes,
Hey, look, my family there, look on the C-A-T-Y-B-A-R-A. That is correct. It is? Yeah. I don't believe it.
well, that was fast. Then he sits back down like Logan did earlier. Now Olive comes up on the stage. You might be wondering what's going to happen next, since she owes Mona Lisa money and her parents couldn't care less about her safety and well-being. Mona begins by informing the audience that Olive has an interesting taste in fashion.
Mrs. Stropsky came in second in her school's Halloween contest.
I was rodeo.
Haunch then gives her a word that is well suited for her awkward personality.
Philanthropy.
Philanthropy? May I have a definition?
That is the delusion that one has become an ox.
But before she can get going, Olive notices that someone in the audience is being an ox themselves.
Oh, excuse me, ma'am. Could you please not sit in that seat?
Once again, a musical number is snuck in just as things are about to get interesting. But luckily for our eardrums, this one is candy to our ears. Finally, after nearly 17 minutes of boredom and the lack of anything interesting, this musical has sprung up from the earth, only for it to return the more boring and unexciting nonsense minutes later. So then after a few more contestants spell their words, Haunch calls up William Barfi, a kid who looks like a frog with cystic fibrosis to the mic. The mere sight of this revolting slob makes me want to Barfi all over my $2,000 computer. What makes it even worse is that this waste of a life form made it to the county spelling bee alive. And I'm surprised he's not hooked up to his nebulizer or a CPAP machine or some other piece of life support equipment. Now before we continue, I'd like to ask a rhetorical question. What do you think is going to happen next? By now it's pretty evident how profound the boredom in this production is. The procedure is always the same. Haunch calls people up, he gives them a word, the contestant spells it. The contestant either gets it right and goes back to their seat, or gets it wrong and is eliminated. Then after so many words are spelled, the character gets a word they don't know how to spell and sing a song in an attempt to distract everyone from their problems. Then it starts over again and repeats ad nauseum. There's absolutely no room for any variation whatsoever. This musical also has very boring set design too. Everything is just so static and nothing ever changes. It's so boring. The backgrounds are stationary, there are no scene changes, and nothing ever changes position or even moves. It's like this musical takes place inside of a doctor's office. It's so clean and devoid of any excitement or contrast. Believe me, this musical gets really boring really quick. While Haunch does say some humorous lines at times to alleviate the incredibly droning proceedings of the spelling bee,
The neap tide is upon us, the Leviathan nears. Counter
it's just a futile attempt to distract everyone from the sloppy, shitty writing, the lack of a main character, personal motivation, and the general strangeness of the characters only serves to exacerbate the problem. The little excitement present in this production dries up faster than water puddles in the Sahara Desert. We cannot relate to anyone, and thus we lose interest in both the characters and the plot. Ironically, this musical is more about the characters that run the spelling bee than it is about the spellers. We know things about their backstories and their motives, unlike the characters who we should be focusing on. We know nothing about them and we cannot relate to them in the slightest. This musical is not an exciting, personal story about kids who participate in the spelling bee and emerge transformed. It is instead the disinteresting and bizarre chronicle of how a nerd who won a spelling bee back during the days of the Anchorman, a registered sex offender, and a flamboyant drunk host a county spelling bee for middle school students. Now with all this boring stuff happening, boredom and tension is building in everyone's system until what results is number 5. Pandemonium. Now it's time for our random audience contestants to get some love. Unlike the kids, they're real people with real lives. Unfortunately, this doesn't mean they're any more normal than the kids are. As a matter of fact, they're just as strange. Like this chick. As much as it breaks my suspension of disbelief to allow audience participation in something like this, I believe it does ultimately add to the appeal. Imagine you get the chance to participate in a county spelling bee and to spell words including but not limited to.
The word is Caterjunes. The word is Mexican. The word is cow.
As expected, the characters aren't too happy. A mutiny takes hold of the bee, in the form of, as one can now safely assume, another song. Hold up, what even is Pandemonium in the first place? I can't even remember its definition or its use in a sentence. Isn't Pandemonium like that one place where your soul goes to after you die and you have to work off all of your sins and that you committed on Earth? Or was it something else? I'm so confused. Now that I think about it, I think I have a picture of Pandemonium on my computer. Just give me a second, I'll show... Oh... There we go. So here's the all-important question. What was the purpose of this scene? I guess if you look at it a certain way, it was an attempt by the writers to give us an insight into how the characters deal with unfairness. Unfortunately, the scene falls short in its attempts to elicit an emotional response from the audience. We do not feel a personal insight into any of our characters, nor do we feel this renewed sense of interest in what's going on. Just a common sense understanding that unfairness makes people pissed off. They just all get angry at Haunch because he's the guy giving them the words. But to be fair, he's just a messenger. I personally doubt he came up with the words himself. Or did he? I don't know. Excuse me. I'll be right back. Hello?
Hi, Mr. Plinkett. Mr. Plinkett? This is Chris, your probation officer. How you doing?
Well, fine. So why are you calling me again?
I'm planning on stopping by later to do my weekly check on you, if you wouldn't mind.
Do you have to do it today?
It's the only day I'd be able to do it this week.
Okay, sure. Just drop by whenever you feel free, I guess.
All right, Mr. Plinkett. I'll be there in an hour or two. See you then.
Okay. What a great start to my day, am I right? I wonder what he'll accuse me of this time around. Part 2. Number 6. My unfortunate distraction. So now it's time for Chip to spell his next word. But, wait a minute. He doesn't look like he's paying much attention to his surroundings at the moment. It's actually quite surprising that a former spelling bee champ could lose his focus at such an opportune time. Let's ask ourselves for a moment, why would Chip's focus be wavering? Is it because A. Chip is losing his focus because he hasn't been called on for a while? B. Chip got up way too early this morning to study words for the bee? C. Chip is bored out of his mind? Or D. Chip is thinking about something perverted? If you guessed D, you're right. The only reason Chip would be losing attention at this point would be because of something that supersedes the importance of spelling bees: infatuous attraction. And no, I did not select that as the answer for D just because it was a sexual innuendo. Or did I? Ah! Wait, what now? Asks Chip. Mr. Haunch, do I really have to go right now?
Well, you can either take your turn now or forfeit.
So now, as much as Chip would like to hide it, he has to get up and go answer the word Haunch is going to give him. And no one at this spelling bee will be able to forget what happens next. Your word is protuberance. May I have the definition? An object that extends outwards from another object. Like your penis! Can you use it in a sentence? Dorito Tolentino's protuberance extended from within his pantaloons while he was having daydreams at the county spelling bee about Marigold Coney Bear and her blue Electric Eels t-shirt. No, I'm just kidding. Here's what he really said. So Chip tries as best he can and tries to spell the word that he has been assigned by Mr. Haunch. However, his erection flares up again and gets the best of him, so he messes up the word halfway through. He starts again from where he left off. Then...
I'm sorry, the correct spelling is T-I-T-T-U-P, Tita.
That's exactly what I said.
Yeah, but first you said T-I-T-U, oh wait, 2 T's.
If there's one thing this scene proves, it's that Haunch is the biggest asshole in Putnam County history. Now I understand that it was stated in the beginning of the beat that you were unable to change the order of letters in a word that had already been spelled, but it was worded in such an obfuscated manner that I doubt that anyone in Chip's position would have picked up on it. Chip gets some obscure rule thrown at him that he was most likely not aware of, and then he gets punished for not knowing of said rule. It's basically an excuse by the writers to kill off Chip from the spelling bee for no good reason. It's sloppy writing at its finest. And after a brief flashback to the best song in this musical, which was ironically used in the worst possible scene, Mahoney forcibly pulls Chip off stage after he tries to shoehorn his way back into the spelling bee. What an anticlimactic end to his spelling bee career. So now that Chip is gone, we can shift our focus back to the audience contestants. By now, all of them have been eliminated by Haunch and his elaborate word book, except for one, the blonde chick. It's pretty evident by now that the audience contestants have no chance of winning the spelling bee, which I'll admit is a positive because it prevents the plot from being screwed up. But it's also a negative because it means we'll have no opportunities to relieve ourselves from the stagnation that is the actual plot. So Haunch gives her an appropriate word for the circumstance that is about to result.
The word is colposinquinonia. Yes.
C-U-L-P-I-N.
No.
But interestingly, instead of just being her selfish and narcissistic self like usual, Mahoney gets out of her chair and goes over to the chick to comfort her with a heartfelt and catchy musical number. I suppose now she's actually living up to her title. So after Mahoney's audition for The Voice is finished, everyone at the spelling bee decides it's time for a snack break. Everyone leaves their seats to go and gather refreshments before the second half of the bee resumes. But just when you thought that this whole debacle with Chip Tolentino was over for good, but wait, there's more. Suddenly, Chip returns to the spelling bee with a snack tray. Apparently, after his loss, he was relegated to selling refreshments to the audience. He goes on lamenting about how he got eliminated before promptly addressing how he lost. He really doesn't pull any punches here.
My unfortunate erection is destroying my perfection.
He also comes clean about what led to his unfortunate elimination. Erection.
Because of Marigold Coney Bear. Because there's something and not a thing between us. I don't blame my brain, but I do blame my penis.
Speaking of elimination, in some renditions of this musical, the song is censored since they can't talk about erections in a musical made for children. So instead of the song being about Dorito Chip's Magic Johnson, it's instead about his unfortunate distraction, which I assume can either mean Marigold or his penis. I'll let you decide. But no matter how you slice it, this song only makes Chip look like more of a sore loser than he already was. The song also riles up the crowd significantly. If you were there, you'd have been laughing at this fool as he sings a song about his nether regions. The good news is that the spelling bee snack break only lasts for a couple of minutes. Otherwise, we'd probably be listening to Chip singing about his uncontrollable libido all night long. Oh, and as if that wasn't enough, as he's vacating the stage, Barfi makes fun of him for what he did and almost starts a fight in front of everyone. Luckily, Haunch and Mona Lisa solved that problem fairly quick. So now that Chip is finally gone for real, we can get back to what this musical is supposed to be about. Spelling words and trying not to fuck up in front of everyone. Mona begins by listing off everyone who's managed to survive this far. Mr. Super Zero.
Mom, I'm in the finals!
Mao Zedong's daughter.
I'm not all business.
Walrus Boy.
It's Farrfee!
Miss, my parents don't care about me.
Oh, Miss Peretti, my God.
And finally, everyone's favorite leftist, Logan Schwarzenegger.
Logan?
Seeing an opportunity presenting itself, Logan's dads decide to get up on stage alongside their daughter to share a musical number. Now this is the point for me in the musical where the plot becomes fragmented. Not just broken, but fragmented so heavily that I'm starting to have the urge to leave my seat and get as far away from this piece of shit as possible. But somehow I stood my ground and put up with the bizarre and idiotic antics which were to follow. Which brings me to my next point. Number 7. Why is everyone in this musical so weird? Every character in this musical is weird and strange. You know what? Let's dig deeper into these characters and rate them on a scale from social faux pas to biggest goof-off since Monica Lewinsky. Without further delay, let's begin our anal cysts into the weirdness. Haunch is a bespectacled kook. Douglas Haunch is a tremendous fool in every conceivable fashion. He lacks any fashion sense whatsoever, and his hair is a bigger disaster than Janet Jackson's wardrobe malfunction at Super Bowl 38. He speaks in a boisterous voice that is arguably more obnoxious than his attire. He is also far too enthusiastic about everything. He seems so excited to be able to put people on the spot and give them some ridiculous word I've never heard about, like encephaloproctosis or baragnosis. Whenever someone as much squirms or appears to get nervous from what they have to spell, he smiles like a malevolent psychopath. I don't know how Mona deals with this idiot in the workplace. Everything about him just exudes this weirdness that permeates everyone's flesh and soul and just makes us want to explode. So is there any explanation for why, out of all people, he had to be the word delivery guy? Nope. Thanks for everything, Dolphin Boy. And by that, I mean nothing. All its family is aberrantly strange. One of the most bothersome things about this musical is when other characters talk about Olive's family that we don't get to see. It's mentioned almost continuously that Olive's dad should be there, but throughout the course of the next 1.5 hours, he never shows up. We have no idea where he works or what's taking so long, since the musical doesn't tell us. So we'll just assume in the meantime that he's the shittiest father ever. The deal with Olive's mom is even more complicated. According to Mona Lisa, she's off in India on some spiritual quest.
Mrs. Strovsky's mother is currently in India on a 9-month spiritual quest.
Whatever that means. It just sounds ridiculous and weird. I can draw the inference that since her mom went to India on a spiritual quest, she must be a Hindu. But Olive doesn't look Indian, which only adds to the resulting confusion. Or maybe Olive is adopted and her mom is actually Indian. But like the father thing, we never find out, because the musical doesn't give us any info about this whatsoever. I wonder if Dolphin ever read over what he had written and noticed that it was full of vacuous holes that needed to be filled. But wait, there's more. I came up with a theory of my own to explain why Olive's mom went off to India. If anything, it's probably better than the canon. Make sure to put on your tinfoil hat for this one, kids. It's a doozy. So I'm not sure if this is just me, but the fact that Olive's mom is on a 9-month journey to India is highly unusual. You see, most pilgrimages last a few months at longest, but she is going to be gone for 3/4 of an entire year, and for an unusually non-specific reason. And I don't need to be an OBGYN to know what lasts for 9 months. But maybe one night Mr. Ostrovsky got off work like 6 hours late, and in the aftermath of the arrival at home, one thing led to another, and Olive's mom decided to hide her pregnancy from her daughter by fleeing to India under the guise of a spiritual quest, which conveniently lasts for the same length as a pregnancy. Mr. Ostrovsky is nothing but a colluded pawn in her plans. Now, why go through so much trouble and waste so much money just to deal with something like that? I don't know, it just sounds like a good action-packed story. A lot of stories operate that way. Just ask Liam Neeson. Marcy Park is a lifeless, boring Catholic girl. Marcy is one of the strangest takes on the overachieving Asian chick trope I've ever seen. She's multilingual.
I speak 6 languages.
She's into multiple sports.
Apparently, I have the temperament.
And she repeatedly denies her own nature.
I'm not all business.
It also becomes evident over the course of the musical that Marcy's life isn't exactly a walk in the park. Get it? It's a pun. Laugh or I'll have you executed! So basically, Marcy is one of the Catholic Church's cheap slaves. Her symbolic marriage to Catholicism is also quite real, as made evident by events in the latter half of the musical. She even calls upon Jesus Christ himself to help her after she loses her shit while trying to spell camouflage. Eventually though, Jesus sets her straight and reminds her that ultimately she is in control of her own destiny. Seeking to divorce herself from the Spanish Inquisition as fast as she can, she intentionally misspells the word so she can quickly segue off stage and not return. So much for that. Logan Schwarzenegger Group is a selfish, brainwashed leftist rube. Logan Schwarzenegger Group also lacks common sense and is one of the weirdest characters in the musical. Aside from the fact that she is the adopted child of 2 gay fathers, she also has this really annoying ass lisp that drives everyone insane. Not to mention that her singing voice sounds even worse. Whenever she opens her mouth, the resulting notes that erupt from her vocal cords sound like a frog with laryngitis. She also is overtly political in everything she says and does. At the beginning, I thought that the comment about her being a member of the Gay-Straight Alliance at her elementary school was nothing more than just a demonstration of her egalitarian nature, but it later turned out that she was nothing more than a brainwashed idiot who only serves to honor her gay dad's self-serving interests. I could go so far to say is that her being in the spelling bee is nothing more than a panhandle for attention on their behalf. This is only further punctuated when they all board the stage to sing about how they're triggered by basically everything in the world and that they're seeking retribution. This whole sequence is no better for children than all those channels on YouTube who try to indoctrinate children with political beliefs. I'm not sure whether Logan's situation is designed to make fun of homosexual families or designed to demonstrate the hazards that SJWs have done to society. I'll let you decide that for yourselves. Chip Tolentino is a strange, egotistical pervert. Chip is no better off than Logan when it comes to many things. For one, just like her, he is very self-centered and only cares about one thing, that the ends justify the means. In this case, that he wins the spelling bee like he did last year and that he comes home happy. But then Chip finds himself in an unusual situation when his libido starts spiraling out of control. Then he ends up getting eliminated because his unfortunate protuberance got the best of him. Although I will admit that he was, in a certain sense, cheated out of the spelling bee, he couldn't control himself, so he was partially to blame. But instead of doing what any reasonable person would do, he instead decides to start complaining about his penis in front of everyone. This, of course, accomplishes nothing and only serves to make a further fool out of himself, as I explained earlier. It also shows you how weird he really is. He's willing to embarrass himself trying to justify his loss to the audience. He also fails miserably in his Hail Mary attempt to subvert Barfi, which only serves to further demonstrate his weirdness and overall incompetence. Nice going, Dorito Head! Leaf Coney Bear is a dumbass super zero. This imbecile is the very definition of weird. His voice, attire, and personality all are strong indicators that Leaf is afflicted with ADHD or the like, not to mention the extremely unusual and confusing method of how he spells words. It seems to involve him throwing himself into some sort of trance.
Hey, look, my family there, look for the C-A-P-Y-B-A-R-A.
He is also one of the few memorable characters in this production, but unfortunately he is not memorable for a good reason. Instead, it's because he is so unusual and reality-defying that you cannot unsee or unhear the debauchery that emanates from his presence. Although we eventually learn to an extent why Leaf acts the way that he does, by then it is far too late. The audience has lost all interest in caring about him in any manner, and we don't have a reason to either. His bizarre nature and seemingly endless stupidity have turned us all off from this desperate grab for attention. I could argue that Leaf's design was flawed to such a degree that it's blatantly obvious to even the most superficial viewer. Luckily for us, Leaf gets eliminated around the halfway point, so we don't have to deal with him for more than half an hour. Thank goodness. Now, before I reveal to you who the weirdest character in this entire musical is, I'd like to showcase for you some honorable mentions. 1. Mona Lisa Peretti. This Sarah Palin look-alike appears to be running the spelling bee, but in reality she's just Ponch's bitch. She says all the words and deals with everything that's actually going down, and she just kind of presides over the whole thing for no good reason. She mainly sees the spelling bee as a soapbox to promote herself. She also feels the need to get up and sing every 15 minutes about how wonderful the spelling bee supposedly is. Strangely enough, no one in the audience seems to mind her doing this, despite the fact that it's pointless, lame, stupid, and all around out of place. Her role isn't significant enough, and she needs to either be rewritten or scrapped entirely. Number 2, blonde audience chick. Now I will admit that she's nowhere as close to weird as anyone I've mentioned before, but her behavior still comes off as awkward and forced. And maybe it's because the whole audience contestant thing is awkward and forced. Anyway, she is the most notable of the audience contestants because she's the last one to be eliminated. But aside from that, she is in no way important to the musical, and so it's strange that she is so central to the progression of the plot. It's like they engineered it so that she would ultimately make the musical longer, so long as her spelling senses were working. Oh wait, they did. Number 3, Miss Mahoney. This girl undergoes one of the most sudden and unusual changes of heart I've ever seen. When first presented to us, she is a very selfish and stuck-up sex offender who is obligated to be doing whatever she came there for. When the aforementioned blonde chick finds herself eliminated, Mahoney spontaneously becomes caring and even feels the need to sing a song about her and how awesome she was. The weirdness in this case lies in her almost out-of-character switchover and how it was handled. and the fact that Mahoney never talks or is otherwise important in any other part of the musical after that moment is equally bizarre. You'd think if she was important they'd have given her more stage time. So now, without further ado, allow me to share with you who, by far, is the weirdest character in this whole musical. William Barfi. From the very start of this musical, the one character that sticks out beyond all others on the weirdness scale is, by no surprise, William Barfi. His name alone invokes this deep sense of yuckiness, like the kind of feeling you get when you're introduced to Ackley from The Catcher in the Rye, or Dexter Jetster from that really disappointing Star Wars money grab, Attack of the Clones. Further, his aberognotic and elephantine physical condition only further deepens this perception. Although he doesn't actively show off his weirdness in the same way Leaf does, his strangeness still permeates his whole character and rubs off on everyone. For instance, he writes words on the floor with his foot before he spells them out to Haunch. For some reason, the strategy also deserves a whole 4 minutes of explanation and glorification to the audience.
It's an alphabet way to spell.
Now, as if that whole thing wasn't ridiculous enough, his personal life is even more preposterous.
Mr. Barfi has a rare mucous membrane disorder. Mr. Barfi made it to the finals last year but had to be eliminated for health-related reasons. Mr. Barfi has a sea anemone circus in his basement.
Nothing that Barfi does seems to be normal in any sense at all. And it's also very evident that he is very passionate about himself and is also very shallow and selfish, almost to the degree of being considered asinine.
It's Farrfee. Does he have a candy bar in his pocket? Ow! What are you, nuts? You could have been disqualified for that if you already hadn't been eliminated.
It's like Dolphin took the worst qualities from each character and blended them all together to form one character. But it's not just that Barfi is weird. As I said before and reiterate here, every character in this musical is weird. This is self-evident. Even if it was the first time you were watching this musical, you would quickly come to the same conclusion. I could go on for hours about how weird and fucking ridiculous everyone in this musical is. Excuse me. I think my probation officer is at the door. I'm gonna go deal with him. I'll be right back. Oh, hello, Mr. Christopherson. You're here already? I am indeed. Also, I'd like to mention a little something I found out about back at the precinct. I got a report from the department that a neighbor issued a complaint about you. What do you mean, complaint? I've done nothing! He said that you stay up late all the time with your outside lights on, that you scream strange things a lot. Is that true? No, not at all. I've done nothing. Are you lying to me, Harry? Lying to a police officer is a serious crime. I'm not lying to you. Just get away from me. Harry, don't make any sudden moves. Just go home already. Harry, listen to me. Listen to me. Harry, what do you want from me? I'm innocent. Harry, stay back or you're gonna get tased. I didn't do nothing, moron. I'm going to tase you if you don't back off. Get back. But I didn't do... I have a probate who tried to attack me. I tased him real quick. He's down. I'm leaving the scene. Part 3. Number 8. A brief analysis of William Barfi. Now, if you thought I was done with talking about William Barfi, then you were wrong. Also, before you try and correct me, I'm well aware that his last name is supposed to be pronounced Barfi. But since everyone else in this musical calls him Barfi, I'm gonna do the same. I mean, he sure does look barfy, if you know what I mean. It's a pun. To be honest with you, when this musical first started, I had no idea that Barfi would become such an integral part of the story. At first, he just kinda looked like another spelling bee participant that was intended to generate some kind of effect from the audience. Whatever that would be. Comic relief? Disgust? Confusion? I can't tell for sure. But then it became obvious after a while that there was more to this blob than met the eye. It was proven after his number, Magic Foot, that he was talented and actually deserved to be a part of the spelling bee. Unless you're Tanzanian, you probably wouldn't know how to spell a word like Haas and Pfeffer. What bothers me is that Barfi is so important to the story, and yet we don't know he's important until the last fourth of the musical. Some are led to believe that Olive is the character we should be focusing on, but we don't get any insight into her personal motivation or see her change. Furthermore, Barfi's weirdness can appear to exclude him from being significant, since the majority of the other characters that are weird aren't significant either. This is only further compounded by his physical appearance, which is disgusting to say the least. I mean, my ex-wife used to say that I looked like baby vomit, but this is just insanity. Without structure, the plot lacks direction and purpose. It's also less likely that the audience is going to care about what's going on if they're confused and don't know what to pay attention to what's happening either. In my opinion, they could have made the plot of this musical better in a couple of ways. 1. Explore the build-up to the spelling bee. In a story, tension needs to build over time and characters need to change. Perhaps we could follow Olive, Barfi, and possibly other characters in how they prepare for the spelling bee. And at the spelling bee, they're out to go and win for their sets of personal reasons, which sets the stakes higher and gives us reasons to root for the characters, but in particular the main character. Or 2. Make the focus of the story deeper. I think that's what they tried to do, but their focus drifted as they wrote more and more and realized they needed to give the other characters some screen time. Ultimately, it all fell apart and became the horrible mess that was the final musical. It's kind of unfortunate they couldn't have put such a diverse and potentially life-changing event to good use. Speaking of not being put to good use, number 9. Juicy. Logan Schwarzenegger is scared. In order to win the spelling bee, she has to beat both Olive and Barfi. Although it's likely she'd be able to beat out Olive if she tries hard enough, she knows that she is obviously incapable of beating Barfi, who has spent the last 2 months inside of his aforementioned sea anemone circus studying spelling words. Her nervousness is starting to get to her, and it shows as she starts asking Haunch for numerous alternate definitions for the words she's spelling.
Yes, it's a channel or drain to carry off surplus water.
Are there any alternate definitions?
Yeah, it's a body of water pent up behind a floodgate.
Eventually, though, Haunch realizes that Logan is simply wasting his time and says,
Why don't you stop stalling and spell a damn word?
Of course, being the idiot social justice warrior she is, she spells the damn word, but not without putting on a scene that I could argue is the worst panhandle for attention in musical history. Conveniently, one of her dads then shows up to institute damage control.
Breathe, Logan. Buck up. Lucy.
So apparently he's so determined to win that he's willing to do anything, even cheat, in order to see his daughter end out on top. Meanwhile, she's more hesitant to support her dad's actions. She wants to win, but also doesn't want to do it by any means of cheating. But then her dad retorts, like any leftist would,
An innocent having a magic foot and unfair advantage.
So basically, she at least partially agrees to go along with this plan. Now before we move on, I'd just like to point out how horribly flawed and idiotic Mr. Schwarzenegger's plan to sabotage Barfi is. The ways that it could go wrong are so numerous and obvious that I could list them out. Let's do just that, shall we? 1. Barfi still needs to step into juice in order for the whole sabotage plan to work. Even though it's in a fairly conspicuous location, there's a chance that he could miss the juice, thereby spoiling Schwarzenegger's entire plan. 2. If Mona Lisa or Haunch noticed that he had spilled juice on the floor, coupled with the idiotically incriminating things he said earlier in front of everyone,
That foot. You have to disable that foot.
What foot?
The magic foot.
they would remove him and clean the juice off the stage. They would probably also disqualify his daughter too for her complicity in this equally idiotic sabotage scheme. It wouldn't even have to be one of the judges either. It could be one of the contestants, or even somebody in the audience, like Marigold the Unfortunate Distractioner. 3. What would Schwarzenegger gain from his daughter winning the spelling bee in the first place? Does she really want a useless savings bond that badly? Or is it, as I suggested earlier, nothing more than a panhandle for bragging rights and recognition? All the evidence suggests the latter. Not to mention that Barfi and Olive are both better at spelling than her, and it shows. They are much more worthy of winning than her. At best, winning would be nothing more than sending her straight to the National Bee, only to make a fool of herself and go back to the safe space from whence she came. 4. What if Logan changes her mind and decides to warn Barfi about the hazard that lies in his path? Like, if she has a guilty conscience and wants to try and win fair and square after all? Finally, what if, despite all of the effort put forth in the juice sabotage attempt, and everything goes as intended, Barfi steps in the juice, he has to spell a difficult word.
She thought she was walking into the dawn, but it turned out it was the darkness.
And his foot gets stuck. He still manages to spell the word correctly anyway? What about that? Oh wait, that's what ended up happening. Ironically, the complexity of this failed attempt to give her some kind of advantage ultimately ties into Logan's demise. When Haunch tells her to spell the word Vug, which comes from Cornish, she spells it in a manner that is as complex as her dad's sabotage plan.
Vug. V-U-G-G-H-E. Vug.
I'm sorry, the correct answer is V-U-G, Vug.
So with much chagrin from her dads and with much celebration from the audience, Logan Schwarzenegger Group makes her exit from the stage and fades off into obscurity. Her days of forcing politics among her peers come to an end in an ending fit only for a leftist like herself. So now that Logan is dealt with, we can narrow our focus back onto the characters that actually matter. The end of the spelling bee is drawing near, and the competition's gonna get intense. Just you wait and see. Don't say I didn't warn. Number 10. I won't come in second! So now we're down to our final 2 contestants. Olive Ostrovsky, who we've been following from the beginning but who hasn't developed whatsoever and we don't know anything about, and William Barfi, who was the weirdest person ever and we know too much about. Haunch starts off the battle to the death by giving Barfi a word to spell. As he spells the word, Olive begins singing about how she doesn't want to lose the Barfi. As soon as he finishes, Olive begins spelling her word, and he trades her off for singing. But then, after a while, something changes.
I'm distracted by your eyes and your smile and your hairdo.
Wait, what? Barfi has a thing for Olive? Why didn't we mention this before? It just kind of materialized out of nowhere. It was never foreshadowed beforehand or developed or anything. And now this close to the end of the musical, you chose to point this out? Well, I guess if anything this points out that although Barfi wants to win, he doesn't want to make Olive feel bad or anything. Seconds later, Barfi realizes that the results of the spelling bee ultimately come down to whether Olive has what it takes. So he snaps back to his usual self and gets back in the fight. Then Olive has to spell elanguescence. We wait in suspense as she lays out the letters for us.
Elanguescence.
Hold up. She got it wrong? How?
I'm sorry, the correct spelling is E-L-A-N-G-U-E-S-C-E-N-C-E.
Oh, dang. She did get it wrong. But how? At this point in the bee? At this moment where the stakes couldn't be higher, she screws up? Ah! Barfi now has to try and spell his word right and win. Will he be able to?
Then please spell Weltanschauung.
As expected, William Morris Barfi is up to the challenge. This very well could be the moment where he clutches the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee and enters the history books. This time, for the first time since his foot got stuck in Logan's dad's juice, he stumbles. There's something on his mind that's distracting him from the smell of victory, the allure of his lady, Olive Ostrovsky. After the first dance 30 seconds with each other, which although elegant is both totally pointless and a waste of our time, Barfi is left with a choice. Either screw up and give Olive another chance at winning, or to spell it right and win the spelling bee for himself. Turns out in the end, Olive makes the decision for him.
It's alright, Barf.
U-N-G. Felton Shower.
We have a winner!
Champion! Just sensational champion! Representational champion! And the Putnam County Spelling Bee!
So now that Barfi has won, Haunch presents him with the highly coveted $250 savings bond courtesy of the Putnam optometrist. But he is not done yet.
Today there's also a runner-up prize. So today and today only, our sponsors are offering a $25 cash reward towards your future education. Congratulations, Mrs. Stronsky.
I can't believe it. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Miss Freddie. I can pay the fee.
This moment demonstrates just how utterly pointless the entire plot of this musical is. At the end of the day, the overall plot of this musical is that Olive goes to the spelling bee, doesn't have money to pay the insurance fee, and despite her skills ultimately ends up losing and then by chance wins an improvised prize, which is conveniently enough to bail her out of debt. You're probably wondering, that was it? Olive lost? After all this time we've been following her? And Barfi won? No, your eyes aren't deceiving you. That's actually how it ends. Aside from the ending of maybe Revenge of the Sith, this is possibly the single most disappointing ending to anything I've ever seen. Olive was, at best, the biggest red herring in musical history. In reality, it was Barfi who should have been who we followed. He had a bigger influence on the plot, we knew more about him, and he even won the spelling bee. It's almost like the musical ended up this way because one day, Dolphin was like, "So guys, I've been writing this musical for a while now, and it's almost done, but I've got a deadline coming up soon, and I'm not sure how I'm gonna have it end. Any ideas for how I could wrap this up as quickly as possible?" I know. How about you make it so that Olive loses, and then Barfi ends up winning, and then everyone goes back to wherever they came from and are never mentioned or heard from again, aside from some cheesy short epilogues made about them, and then the curtain call happens? And that's basically all there was to the ending. I mean, there is a short epilogue sequence and a curtain call after everything's all over, but as far as I'm concerned, that's the end of the musical. Now that I've covered everything that I've wanted to cover for this review, I can finally say, number 11. Goodbye. So you're probably wondering, what's my overall opinion about this musical? Pretty much everything I've already said. The plot is static and boring, the characters are flat, undeveloped, and just plain weird, the set is dry and lifeless, and everything just lacks a general sense of motivation and purpose. Ironically, the musical has basically everything it needs to be a good story, and yet it isn't. And that's because it's missing a major ingredient that is integral to some of the best productions of all time. An emotional connection to the characters. In most major productions, from the very start of the production, we become emotionally connected to at least one character and their situation, and as a result, it makes the plot much more emotionally engaging. Rooting for them as they go through their personal ups and downs and ultimately overcome evil and return transformed. This personal connection is always important, regardless of whether the story that's being told on the stage is a monomyth, a Bildungsroman, romance, or even an absurdist play like Waiting for Godot. Even in comedies, being able to relate to a character or characters is important. It makes the work as a whole feel far more interesting, since the humor is being used to advance the story, rather than the story being used to advance the humor. Another thing the well-written productions are known for is their relative ease of understanding and simplicity. The plot is linear, simple, and easy to understand, even if the underlying structure and backstories are more complicated. By contrast, Spelling Bee has relatively simple, stereotyped characters, and the situation they're in is convoluted and unexplained for the duration of the production. Finally, although the endings of good stories have twists and turns, as to make their endings partially unpredictable, their progression is fairly recognizable. Spelling Bee, meanwhile, deceives the audience with red herrings and abuses of Chekhov's gun time and time again and leaves viewers confused about what they've just seen. No viewer likes to leave feeling like they've been tricked for the length of the production. If anything, watching this production leaves you with a different mindset than the one you walked in with. It causes you to realize that just because something seems simple on paper, it might not actually be so in the end. It also demonstrates the gullibility of the masses into watching something just because it is written by supposedly reputable people. So in the end, if someone was to ask me to my face, why is the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee a bad musical? I would tell them this: the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and good stories are built from the ground up. You might also be wondering, what all did I actually like about this musical? Well, I did like some of the musical numbers. I liked Mahoney's spontaneous transition from selfish a-hole to slightly caring individual. I thought a few of the jokes were humorous and in good taste.
Anatidyphobia. That is the fear that somewhere, somehow, a duck is watching you.
I liked it when it was over. Anyways, that's all I have to say about this musical. Would you look at the time? I think I hear my oven timer going off. My next batch of pepperoni pizza rolls must be done. And to that, I'd like to say, goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. Email me on this web zone if you want a pizza roll. I have a fresh batch of 2 dozen for you if you want it. I can send them by either FedEx or UPS if you would prefer. We can also negotiate means of payment for taking out my corrupt probation officer, Mr. Christofferson, when you order.